Welcome back to YellowCard Vanguard. I'm your host, Toku from It's Toku TV on Twitch. Throughout the week, I'm streaming Vanguard on my Twitch channel. We'll be building decks, playtesting, and just having a grand old time, so be sure to swing on by. With new clan collection reveals coming out every day, you know what that means. It's time for a new chapter of clan collection cores. I want to preface this video and the entirety of the series by saying that many of these lists are entirely conceptual and surface deep, and will need your own playtesting to fine-tune. But each of these will aim to provide a way of thinking on how to take your new support in Clan Collection 3 and 4 and put it into a working deck. They won't all be optimized, but I believe they will be a good baseline to build off of. Welcome to Clan Collection Cores. You see, a few years back on a routine dig for dinosaur fossils, a landslide broke out and nearly broke my leg in two. They had to operate quickly, so they used the dinosaur bone I found to save my leg. Ever since then, I've had what they call Dino DNA. Wait, what? What do you mean I've already used this bit before? When? Oh, literally last time? Huh. In any case, we're back once again in Clan Collection Cores with our favorite overgrown reptile dinosaurs, these very clever girls, the Raptors. This military ride line features the growth of our very own Widow Raptor from Sergeant, Captain, to finally Colonel. Let's take a look at the new cards. Our new Grade 3 is Military Dragon Colonel Raptor. Once per turn, on the Vanguard circle, you can counterblast one and retire one or more rearguards, and Colonel Raptor gains 5k until the end of turn for each unit retired. Then, if 5 or more were retired for the cost, and the opponent's Vanguard is Grade 3 or greater, at the end of the battle, restand Colonel Raptor. Also grants all units that were placed in the battle phase an extra 5k power. Did somebody say Gluttony Dogma? Colonel Raptor had a huge glow up from its former look in the Limit Break era to now. I will repeat again until your ears get sore, but a restanding Vanguard that stays as itself is so much better than a Vanguard that rewrites into a new one. Colonel Raptor gaining the power for the turn, and he crits for the turn, makes it such a terror to deal with come that turn 4. And maybe the only issue I can see is the Eat 5 could be a heavy cost that we might have issue reaching. But Tachikaze has so much random draw in their kit that I don't think it should be a huge issue in quantity, only quality. Colonel's skill to also buff any superior called Tachis makes for a pretty simple attack pattern of attack with rears, attack with colonels, hatch out some more dinos, attack with them again, and still hitting because of that 5k buff. Then finally you end with a one last colonel attack, maybe leaving one last rearguard to give triggers power to. The only downside to it is that it's turned off by a single defensive trigger, and then you're stuck focusing all of your attacks on Colonel. Regardless, Colonel is still an amazing addition to the clan and an amazing new. The new Grade 2 is Military Dragon Raptor Captain. When rolled upon by specifically Raptor Colonel, we can Soul Blast 1 and search our deck for up to 2 Grade 2 or less Military Dragons and Superior Call them. Furthermore, when this unit is retired from the rear circle from our card's ability, if we have an equip gauge, we can Soul Blast 1 and recall it to an open rear circle. A hyper-specific card with hyper-specific timings for the first effect. But the second effect is very generic and we can appreciate it for that. Though incredibly archetype locked for its on rolled upon skill, it's a very strong effect nonetheless, getting 2 bodies out of nowhere for a cheap cost of Soul Blast 1. And its second skill works in Gaia and in Colonel as well, being able to revive itself as the body to attack with gives extra value out of this one card. Finally, the new Grade 1 is Military Dragon Raptor Sergeant. When placed on the Vanguard circle, check the top 7 of our deck for up to 1 Grade 2 or greater Military Dragon and add it to hand. Then, either on the Vanguard circle or the Rearguard circle, when Sergeant attacks or boosts, we can choose one of our unequipped rearguards and equip them with a gauge from the top of the deck. Once again, similarly to Raptor Captain in having a hyper-specific ride line-esque skill, but also very valuable as it is a +1 to hand and helps tutor towards your Grade 2 or Grade 3 rides. Its second skill once again works miracles in multiple decks. In Gaia, Raptor Sergeant could read on attack or boost, give a rearguard 10k, and in Colonel, Raptor Sergeant reads on attack, turn Captain into a reviving attacker. Obviously, if Sergeant was selective gauging from the drop zone, that would be better, but also maybe asking for too. So with the new cards introduced, how do we build a deck out of it, what's our win con, and how do we get there? It's fairly simple as our most restanding large Vanguard win cons, and that is to swing twice with our cranked up Colonel and hopefully clap some cheeks with a crit or two. But at the same time, we also want to make use of Colonel's second skill to give our hatched dragons that little bit more bite to help close out games. Tachikaze also has a secondary win con in Savage Mercenary as well. Being able to just superior call it from hand early through the use of Savage Shooter or Dilawful Pyro can make the game incredibly uphill for your opponent and sometimes just straight up game winning for you if your opponent just can't remove that big attacker. With those two win cons set up, we're going to run 4 copies of Colonel Raptor as our primary win con, a self-contained finisher in itself as well as our Savage Mercenary engine, 3 copies of the Mercenary, 3 copies of Dilawful Pyro, and 4 copies of Savage Shooter. So instead of 4 copies of Savage Mercenary, we're only going to run 3 as he does clog up our strategy, so the 4th does feel a bit bricky. Same thing with Dilawful Pyro. This is an alternate high roll win con that we only go for if we can. Whereas Savage Shooter is at 4 as a cost is going first or second play that can get you into Savage Mercenary or just get you a free card and a strong attacker on the board early. Every other card in our deck now should aim to support our Colonel. We're going to run Raptor Sergeant and Raptor Captain as alternative ideal rides. 3 copies of Raptor Sergeant to ride into if we didn't get the Savage Shooter. Both grade 1s that on ride can get us a very high value. Raptor Sergeant also being able to equip Gauge any unit that needs it, namely Captain, is very strong, ensuring that as long as you have at least 1 Sergeant on board, we'll get extra value out of a single copy of Captain. We also run 3 copies of Raptor Captain as our primary ideal ride. So we don't run 4 because its effect outside of being rode upon isn't very amazing, and because between the 2 effects, this one card has 2 Soul Blast costs associated with it, and Savage Shooter is already using 1. And outside of rewriting into Raptor Colonel, we have very little venue of Soul Charge, so 3 copies seems to be the perfect number for it. Writing it means that we can call the other 2 out, or if we already have 1, we can call one of the 2 remaining Sergeants as well if we rode a Sergeant. Its second skill combos well with Colonel's effect to retire it and have itself call itself back as an attacker with a 5k boost, but that much should have been obvious already. For even more battle phase calls, we're going to be running red and blue. Regiment Dragon Regodon at 3 copies, and Darting Dragon Blue Sprint at 3 copies as well. These are both the same card, just with different names to bypass their hard once per turn restrictions, and when eaten by Colonel Raptor, can superior call their equip gauge, and that unit will gain 5k from Colonel's skill. Now of note is that if any triggers are called, that 5k buff does nothing for us in this deck compared to Gaia's 10k buff. So I generally like to keep Savage Shooter's rearguard circle skill to selectively gauge red or blue and use red and blue to gauge captains as well. Finally, some consistency pieces. We're going to run 4 copies of the card that defines VPremium Tachikaze, Ravenous Dragon Mega Rex. This card is wild and I'm still kicking myself for forgetting it last Clan Collection Core. Thank you to Card Dweeb for reminding me that he exists. An effect on both the Vanguard and the Rearguard Circle to convert any Rearguard into an Upstart Goblin that isn't tied to Counterblast is just so strong. It helps us dig into our more important pieces and helps enable some early game multi-attacks to make your first Colonel Raptor that much more threatening. As long as you're playing the Tachikaze, you're always going to be playing 4 Mega Rex. Then, in our last 3 slots, we opt to run 2 copies of Prison Bird and 1 copy of Polakenspine. The 2 copies of Prison Bird sort of kind of overlap with Raptor Sergeant to find our Raptor Colonels, but more importantly, if we weren't able to high roll the Savage Mercenary off a Savage Shooter, Prison Bird can find a Mercenary to hold in hand to be superior called off of with Dilawful Pyro on our next turn. Finally, the single copy of Polakenspine. As stated before, this deck does have a soul issue. Between Savage Shooter, Raptor Captain, and no way to gain soul outside of rewriting, we won't be using too many copies of Raptor Captain. Polakenspine serves as a very strong late game option when the resource crunch hits, giving us not only soul charge, which is needed for another captain usage, but counter charge, and also being able to re-gauge the newly called captain. Going into the trigger lineup, it's the tried, true, and tested 8 crit, 4 draw Sentinels, 4 heal Guardians. The grade 3 heal Guardians are mandatory, by the way. Having 4 less cards that whip attacks after being called from red or blue helps a lot more than expected. We choose to run the draw Sentinels because the extra draw helps us find more rear guards to feed to Colonel, and we run 8 crit instead of 8 front because this deck is very vertical. We're focused on our big center column and wanted to have as many crits as possible. Now for other options. One thing that you might notice while playing this deck is that your first grade 3 turn is actually very lukewarm. Even when you do ride Colonel over Captain, because we don't get our restand until our opponent is also at 3, we don't do too much that turn. And even if we do try and make something out of that turn and try to use Colonel's second skill for the 5k buff, you're expending a lot of your rear guards that is better saved for when you do go for Colonel's next big turn. We can consider running Light Battle Dragon Gigano Blazer, a very strong turn 3 ride that lets us +2 to board, draw 2 new cards, and also puts out a very strong aggression with the 5k front row buff. Then, you can re-ride into Colonel the next turn and go for the kill. I actually think that asides that, there shouldn't be too much about this list that should be messed around with. It's fairly streamlined and the ratios are kind of handpicked. What advice I can give is to not consider running this with Spinal Driver or Gaia. Both of those cards aim to play very horizontally, whereas Colonel is very vertical, and going into a card pool for both will stretch you really thin. In conclusion, Tachikaze's finally got a really fearsome boss monster. Rather than having a boss that supports the little idiots we shit out from our equip gauges, everything is food for Colonel Raptor. And the Tachikaze game plan plays into that so well, and what a great support that the clan got, and I'm very happy and excited to see what Colonel's selfish playstyle does for the clan in the VPremium format. In any case, this has been it from me for this episode of Clan Collection Cores. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this, like the video as it helps motivate us to keep the gears going, and leave a comment down below. Every little bit helps the channel. This has been Toku from the YellowCard Vanguard channel. Toku out.